Freedom in the World is a yearly survey and report by the US-based and partially US government-funded non-governmental organization Freedom House that measures the degree of civil liberties and political rights in every nation and significant related and disputed territories around the world. Freedom in the World was launched in 1973 by Raymond Gastel. It produces annual scores representing the levels of political rights and civil liberties in each state and territory, on a scale from 1 light-year free or not free. The report is often used by researchers in order to measure democracy and correlates highly with several other measures of democracy such as the Polity Data series. The Freedom House rankings are widely reported in the media and used as sources by political researchers. Their construction and use has been evaluated by critics and supporters. The rankings are from the Freedom in the World 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021 surveys, each report covering the previous year. The average of each pair of ratings on political rights and civil liberties determines the overall status of free or not free. An asterisk indicates countries which are electoral democracies. To qualify as an electoral democracy, a state must have satisfied the following criteria. An electoral democracy must have a score of 7 or more out of 12 in political rights subcategory A, an overall aggregate score of 20 in their political rights rating and an overall aggregate score of 30 in their civil liberties rating. Freedom House's term, electoral democracy, differs from liberal democracy, in that the latter also implies the presence of a substantial array of civil liberties. In the survey, all free countries qualify as both electoral and liberal democracies. By contrast, some partly free countries qualify as electoral, but not liberal, democracies. These are territories as opposed to independent countries. According to Freedom House, a quarter of all declines of freedom in the world in 2016 took place in Europe. Percentage of countries in each category. From the 1973 through 2014 reports. Not free, partly free, free sources. Country status and ratings overview 1973 to 2016. Number and percentages of electoral democracies 1989 to 2016. Freedom in the World 2018 report covering 2017. Notes. There is some debate over the neutrality of Freedom House and the methodology used for the Freedom in the World report, which has been written by Raymond D. Gastel and his colleagues. The neutrality and biases of human rights indices have been discussed in several publications by Kenneth A. Bolin. Bolin wrote that considered together these criticisms suggest that some nations may have been incorrectly rated on Gastel's measures. However, none of the criticisms have demonstrated a systematic bias in all the ratings. Most of the evidence consists of anecdotal evidence of relatively few cases. Whether there is a systematic or sporadic slant in Gastel's ratings is an open question. In his 1986 study, Bolin discussed reviews of measurements of human rights, including the index reported in Freedom in the World, and Freedom House emphasized liberties rather than the exercise of freedom. According to Adam Prevorshi, who gave the following example, in the United States, citizens are free to form political parties and to vote. Yet even in presidential elections only half of U.S. citizens vote. In the U.S., the same two parties speak in a commercially sponsored unison, wrote Prevorshi. More recent charges of ideological bias prompted Freedom House to issue this 2010 statement. Freedom House does not maintain a culture-bound view of freedom. The methodology of the survey is grounded in basic standards of political rights and civil liberties, derived in large measure from relevant portions of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. These standards apply to all countries and territories, irrespective of geographical location, ethnic or religious composition, or level of economic development. Mannering et al. Wrote that Freedom House's index had two systematic biases. Scores for leftists were tainted by political considerations, and changes in scores are sometimes driven by changes in their criteria rather than changes in real conditions. Nonetheless, when evaluated in Latin American countries yearly, Freedom House's index was very strongly and positively correlated with the index of Adam Prevorshi and with the index of the authors themselves. They evaluated Pearson's coefficient of linear correlation between their index and Freedom House's index, which was 0.82. Among these indices in the two others studied, the correlations were all between 0.80 and 0.86. As previously quoted, Bolin criticized previous studies of freedom in the world as anecdotal and inconclusive. They raised issues needing further study by scientific methods rather than anecdotes. Bolin studied the question of ideological bias using multivariate statistics.